Indian tribes perform quite well on ice. We don't conform to environments. No, we've never once conformed to an environment. We demand an environment conform to us. Time and time again, we demand someone conform to our standards. We build an environment around us. It doesn't matter whether it's on a sheet of ice in the North Atlantic or in the middle of the desert, which is, Saudi Arabia built by Halliburton, which is basically our technology and stuff like that. They wouldn't have built it without us, in other words. We are not designed for an environment. The indigenous white rabbits of Europe are not designed around any environment at all. We design our environments around us, and there's never been an environment that wasn't that we did not get what we demand from. Yeah, we do not conform to environments. A lot of people don't understand when they say race is real and it matters how real it is. We can walk into an environment, turn things upside down, and the whole world will adjust. The whole world conforms to us. We don't conform to them. Think in terms of let me give you a natural example, something right in front of your face. What you see is what you can get. Some places on the East Coast, a lot of places in America, you have these little garter snakes. In North America, all over North America, you have these little garter snakes. These little garter snakes basically are harmless little snakes. A lot of kids like to catch them and whatnot. But crawling through the grass, they'll pretty much disappear. They conform to an environment. That little garter snake is harmless. The only defense it has is that it conforms to an environment. It totally is designed to fit into that environment. On the other hand, if you're in the Caribbean or maybe you're in Florida, they have these snakes that don't conform to an environment. They're called coral snakes. They're big, bright, red, yellow, black, and they're beautiful actually. Yeah, coral snakes are beautiful. You can see them a mile away, but they don't conform to an environment. They're not a little garter snake. They stick out. They stick out really. They stick out like a little white rabbit in the middle of Detroit. Yeah, they stick out. They stick out a whole lot. They don't conform to an environment. They demand an environment conform to them. You don't believe me? Go grab a coral snake. Yeah, you don't want to tread on one of those. You don't want to fool with one of those. They don't worry about hiding. They don't have to. They're coral snakes. It's just what they are. But that's the difference in those little snakes. Now, maybe not all of them are poisonous, but I wouldn't go grabbing one to find out. They tend to be pretty lethal and pretty deadly, but the indigenous white rabbits of Europe are like that. We don't conform to environments. We demand environments conform to us. That's how real race is. And you could say some of the things about East Asians as well, but most people are pretty dependent on environment. We're not. I don't care whether it's in Iceland on a sheet of ice. They can build pretty much utopia, or in the desert. We can do it time and time again. Sure, we can do it on Mars. We can do it anywhere if we put our mind to it. But saying that we're the people of the cold or the people of ice, that's well, you don't fully understand that race is real and it matters. It's that real. We don't conform to environments. We're not designed around an environment. And no one else on this planet can totally design an environment like we can around us. Some of the East Asians do a good job, but we turn it on its head. Most of them have no interest in everywhere the Chinese go, they build little Chinatowns. The French, the Irish, and several of these groups in Europe all speak a different language, all build different architecture and everything else, and they all come from the same mother. The Chinas move from China to America, and they build little Chinatown. Well, that's pretty neat and everything, but we are a totally different level than most. Totally radically different. Radically different in every way. They're still speaking the same language, Mandarin, Cantonese, and everything else. Well, we always are on to different languages, new and bigger and better. We're like chaos in that regard. Different types of architecture, so on and so forth. We do not, again, conform to environments. We're constantly doing something new and something different. We're just pure, we're the creative people. It's what we do best. Our creativity and our ability to live in a fantasy world, I believe, go hand in hand. You can't have yin without yang. Many times people have talked about our race's ability to indulge in fantasy. And it is nothing more apparent when you look at something like America that rose out of the wilderness. You're talking about living out a fantasy, raising a skyscraper, going to the moon. Time and time again, we indulge fantasies. I guess more of us would like more of the positive fantasies instead of the negative ones. The negative ones are what I would label wordist fantasies, communism, all these isms. These isms can start indulging in a fantasy that usually becomes destructive. Sure. In America, in the Anglosphere and in parts of Europe, they're living second-generation communism, anti-racism fantasies, egalitarianism fantasies. I could go on and on. We indulge in fantasies all the time. We are the creative rabbits, the fantasy rabbits, and we can go there. And we do it bigger and better. The crazy thing about our fantasies is we make them come true for better or worse. I mean, the communists actually, we've been living in this egalitarian fantasy since World War II. We've been making it work, and it's fallen to pieces. It's broken bankrupt. The Russians lived in a communist fantasy. A Marxist, a scientific materialist fantasy. Totally fantasy. It's not a system I'd want to live into. But an economic fantasy for, 70 years or something like that. It's just comedy. It is comedy how we do this time and time again. But you see, if you got to have the yin, you got to have the yin to the yang to get the good fantasies. I've heard some old timers rip on some of these kids. Maybe if you're over 50, you don't really like some of the different fantasy stuff these young kids deal with, especially the white kids. They like the video games. One of the reasons basically I started talking about I went into some World War II stuff is because well, let me make a point. Himmler indulged one of his great fantasies. His great fantasies was to look up the origin of these white gods and to figure out the origins of our race and figure out this ancient cosmic war and about these ancient civilizations and to figure out their energy systems. And when you're dealing with an integrated physics, you're dealing with an energy, and not only are you dealing with an energy system, but that energy system can immediately be weaponized. If you know anything about zero-point energy or even the concept, well, it's a weapon system as well. It's totally integrated. I'm guessing that's how he appealed to them, because they wanted alternative energies. So he indulged that fantasy. It's the first time in the history of the world a white rabbit. Imagine your little local Nazi wearing an armband marching up and down going Hail Hitler. All of a sudden he's allowed to indulge a fantasy with a rich, powerful state like the Third Reich and allowed to run anywhere in the world. To indulge some fantasy looking up all kinds of myths and legends and clues and whatever. And where there's smoke, there's fire. So they must have found something. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. It's just too obvious nowadays. They're putting it in too many people's faces. But, that's indulging a fantasy. Negative, you could see it either way. The story hasn't been written yet. I don't know the whole truth of what they found. They definitely did something, though. It's just too obvious right now. But when it comes down to these fantasies, where does it end? Well, it doesn't. That's what makes us white rabbits. It's what's special about the indigenous white rabbits of Europe. We can imagine wild configurations and make them come true. I don't like the wordist fantasies, but a lot of these older white rabbits, they don't like all these fantasies, these young kids. But you got to understand that energy's got to flow. If you're a creative race, you're the creative rabbits, and you're indulging in a fantasy. I mean, you're prone to fantasy, regardless. It doesn't matter whether it's Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was a movie that wasn't thought because it was too long, and they didn't think they'd go see it. And, oh my goodness, white kids everywhere are flocking to see this thing. They even started selling more Lord of the Rings books afterwards. But they didn't think it would do that. Well, it doesn't have any diversity in it. Well, actually, it did. It had some white rabbits taking on all kinds of wild creatures, but they were all white. Interesting thing about Lord of the Rings is very, very successful. It was not diverse at all. No, it was a very positive movie. But that I call that, I think that's positive fantasy. Some old timers don't like that. They say it's too much fantasy, but that's what our race is about. A lot of these old timers indulge in fantasies too. They call themselves undercover lovers. They dream of fighting some race war, Rohawa. That's a fantasy as well. Now, anything can come true. That's the thing with our race. Fantasies can always come true. It doesn't matter whether it's Himmler stuff or positive, negative, communism, capitalism, whatever. Fantasies can come true. And we're big on fantasies. I don't know how to get the yin without the yang, though. I don't know how to get the positive without the negative. In this